right. Call meeting to order, February 12th, Planning Board. May I ask everybody to stand with us for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any disqualifications tonight? I just want to make a point. I have known for a while the first applicant. We don't have any business association, but I just wanted to make that known to everybody.
Thank you.
We've got a quorum with, we got 5.
5 members.
I have lost my cheat sheet. Give me a second.
There you go.
All right. Any changes to the minutes?
Or agenda, sir.
Approve the
Agenda, sir.
Hmm?
There are no changes to the agenda, sir.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second?
I'll second that.
All right.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. All right. Now, are there any changes to the minutes?
I
there
don't know
no
of any
interchange?
changes.
Hmm?
I don't know of any changes.
All right.
Make that one 10.
Entertain a motion for approval of the minutes.
Oh, I approve the minutes for December 11th, 2018.
I'll second that motion. All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. All right. No old business. On to the new business. All right. First thing is PB 1902, Hunter Stewart Tax Amendment, crab shedding, request to amend Chapter 4 of the Unified Development Ordinance to allow crab shedding within a fully enclosed building in the General Business Zoning District. Is there anybody here to represent the applicant? Could you just state your name and address for us?
Okay, I'm Hunter Stewart, 102 Old Oaks, Belzone, North Carolina.
Are y'all ready now? Okay. If you'll give them just a second to make their presentation, and then
Sure.
we'll call you back up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to start by talking about the purpose in general of this text amendment. So the applicant is proposing to allow crab shedding in the general business zoning district where it's not currently allowed, with the condition that all activities, including the equipment, freezers, tanks, that sort of thing, would be inside a fully enclosed building. A little bit of information about what you're seeing in the actual staff report. Along with the applicant's request, staff is taking this opportunity to make some needed changes to the language that already is in this section of the ordinance. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to ask. Currently, crab shedding is allowed in the agricultural and mixed residential zoning districts, as well as both light and heavy industrial zoning districts. And currently, none of those activities are required to be inside a building. And so the applicant's proposing to allow that same use in all general business zoning districts with that one condition, that it all happens inside the building. The amendment meets all the review standards for text amendment, as you can see there in your staff report. And so basically the changes that are being proposed by the applicant's amendment are that all equipment of the operation, example tanks, coolers, and freezers, must be within a fully enclosed building, and that on-premise wholesale of crabs would also be allowed. And the request is consistent with the 2006 land use plan. It's also reasonable and in the public interest. And for those reasons, staff has recommended approval as submitted. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
All right, does anyone on the board have any questions for staff?
Not right now.
All right, well, Mr. Stewart, I think they're ready for you.
Okay. What I was, of course, you've already heard what I was questioning doing was like to ask the Board of Commissions to consider allowing blue crab shedding in a general business zoned area. Is there anything you'd like me to answer to?
Everything's going to be indoors?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Stewart,
Sure.
can you describe to the board here the process of crab shedding for those who may not understand it, and what you do with the residual crab shells that are molted afterwards?
Okay, well, generally we take those back out, the shells after they've malted, back out into the sound, actually, on the boat. This actual lot where I'm at here is waterfront, so I do have a boat access to that particular lot. So we catch a crab called a peeler crab. We catch them right here in Currituck. It's a crab. It's same as a blue crab, but he's in his molting stage. As far as he's growing, and to grow, he has to back out of his shell. And when he does that, we can have him in a tank and then shed them and sell them for a soft crab. So that would be the point of it.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else?
I only have one other question in regards to the molten shells afterwards. If you are running your crab shedding process, how long would it be before you would accumulate enough shells to get rid of those?
That's a daily thing.
That's
daily.
Okay.
And actually, the shells have no odor at all. I mean, if you really want to discuss that, there's actually no odor to that whatsoever at all. It's actually just crab shells, but they're removed every day.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else? All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll close the,
Is there anyone else to speak? Mr. Chairman?
is there anyone else to speak on that? Sorry. All right, well, I'll close the open session and entertain a motion.
Motion for approval.
Second?
Hold on just a minute. Would you like to use the consistency statements?
I'll let you take that later.
I would like to, well, we have to have a second before it can be amended.
I'll second.
Thank you. I'd like to request to amend your motion, a friendly amendment to your motion,
Okay.
to include the consistency statements, which would be, it is in the public interest. It allows for the appropriate expansion of an industry crab shedding in a commercial zoning district that has been part of Currituck's historic fishing and crabbing culture since inception. It encourages small-scale business startups in appropriate locations to serve neighborhoods and the general public. And crab shedding is an environmentally sensitive operation as it depends upon clean waters to harvest from and shed crabs in. Therefore, the industry remains vigilant in protecting the environment. Would you accept that amendment?
Yes, we do.
All right. We have a motion. We have a second. Vote.
Discussion? Or no?
Any more discussion?
No, sir.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Motion passes. All right, on to the next one. PB 1904, Currituck County Revised Solar Tax Amendment. Clarification was needed regarding size, limits on solar energy facilities, certifications for requiring landscaping, inverter building door placement, and updating the decommissioning plan when property changes ownership beyond 2 degrees of kinship.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At one of the commissioners' previous meetings recently, they adopted the solar language that was a combination of what the planning board had recommended and what the Board of Commissioners had come up with. The next day, it was decided by the commissioners that there were a couple of things that they wanted additional clarification on beyond what was adopted that night. So that's what you're seeing here tonight. I'll just briefly go through the changes. There's a recommendation for a maximum size for a solar energy facility. If the parcel or parcels are under single ownership, the size limit would be 1,000 acres. If the solar energy facility is owned by more than one property owner, if more than one property owner owns multiple properties, then it would be 1,500 acres. And if 2 or more lots are owned by different people, they actually have to be abutting, which would mean they would have to touch each other. If a road separates them, they can't be part of the same project. There's a certification that is requested by a landscaping contractor, architect, or an arborist that would certify that the required buffer yards reach 100% opacity in 5 years. There's an amendment regarding the buildings that house the inverter equipment that the door must face away from the northwest annex, as it could interfere with the radar equipment there. There is a requirement regarding clarifying ditch maintenance, that it's the responsibility of the solar energy facility to maintain the ditches that traverse the site. They're also responsible for maintaining the ditches that run along the boundary of the site, as well as allowing a 25-foot maintenance access drainage easement along that from the top of the bank in towards the facility, and so that access can be made with heavy equipment or whatever's needed to clean out those ditches. The final proposed change is when the solar energy facility changes ownership beyond 2 degrees of kinship, so say beyond immediate family. The county would be notified, so that way we can update or have them update their decommissioning plan. And it's important for the county to be in that loop because the decommissioning plan states that the current property owner is responsible for that decommissioning or if there's any violations or anything on the property. So that's just a little clarification. And from the text amendment that we heard at our December meeting. You can see in your packet your text amendment review standards, and all 7 of those appear to be met. And let's flip back. When you get to page 30 of your packet, you'll see the statement of consistency and reasonableness. And based on the criteria there in your packet, it has been determined that the request is consistent and reasonable, and it is also in the public interest. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Was there any necessary reason given for capping the acreage on single landowner or
Not that
one?
I was aware of.
Thanks.
Ms. Glade, do you mind clarifying for us on packet page 29 about the ditch maintenance and explain to us what that means in 10A and 10B?
The ditches that traverse the site that are interior to the site, the solar energy facility is completely responsible for maintaining those ditches. Think about it as demucking at some point, mowing. Sometimes they have to snag if any trees are in, not that there would be trees there, but if something falls in the ditch, they would be responsible for clearing that to improve the drainage. They're also responsible for maintaining the ditches on the boundary of the property. And what would happen is that if the ditch is wholly on their property, they're responsible completely for maintaining that boundary ditch. And they would have to put a 25-foot drainage and maintenance access easement from the top of the bank in towards the facility. And what that allows is equipment to get in and maintain that ditch. If they fail to maintain the ditch and the county has to go in, that access easement is there for the county to go in, or if the county contracts with somebody to go in and maintain that ditch. If a portion of the ditch is on their property, I think legally they're responsible for only maintaining the portion that's on their property, but we would still require that access easement so that way we could maintain what was there.
Thank you. And Ms. Glade, would you mind explaining to the board about the reasoning behind having the access doors pointing away from the Northwest Naval Support Annex?
Yes, it's my understanding that a commissioner has talked to the folks at the Northwest Naval Annex, and there was concern of electromagnetic field interference from these inverters. If the door was opened, it could interfere and degrade the radars that are at the annex there. You've heard the Roth use. I don't know what all those letters means, but anyways, that would could interfere with that radar. Now, just to one step further, Northwest Naval Annex is a TRC member, so they're going to be reviewing that closely as well.
And I had a question also about packet page 30 about the 2 degrees of kinship.
Yes, sir.
Can you explain to the board what that means? If I own the land, who can I transfer it or sell it to in the family?
Sure. Within 2 degrees of kinship, think parent, grandparent, child, grandchild, or sibling. So if it stays within those boundaries, there's no update to the decommissioning plan required. But if you sell it to, say, an energy company or anyone else, then that's when you would be required to update that decommissioning plan with the county.
And at that point,
Yes,
once
step family too. Steps and halves count as well.
and once that incident occurs, then the countdown begins again for the 3-year renewal of the decommissioning plan. Is that right?
That is correct.
On the easement you were talking about down the ditches, is that like something that's going to be deeded to the county?
It is not. What it will be is it will be dedicated on the plat, and it will be for whomever needs to use
gotcha.
it. If it's hopefully the county will never need to use it, because
Right.
if we need to use it, that means that they have not done what they were supposed to do.
And you've had to get somebody else.
Right, and we've had to hire somebody, or we send people out ourselves to maintain the ditch. But if they have a contractor themselves and they want to send them in, they would have that 25-foot free and clear, no fencing, no landscaping, to access with their heavy equipment.
If it's decommissioned and the solar panels go away, I guess the easements go away with it.
You would have to abate the easement, and that could be done through another plat that just says vacate the easement, or through deed.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for staff?
Just on the environmental concerns, I probably just looked over it, but it looks like it's saying every 2 years it gets tested. And then if there's nothing found, it goes to 5 years.
Yes, they're not requesting to change that. That's the language that was adopted. If those initial tests don't show any contamination, then you can go out the 5 years.
Okay.
And that was the planning board's recommendation.
They
And
do check it the first year and then it goes to 2, right?
Check it before construction begins.
Before they even start, it's checked.
And then 2 years after completion.
Right, and then if it's clean and clear, then you're allowed to go out to every 5 years.
Okay.
And it's being tested for the same elements that a residential well would be checked.
That is correct.
Okay.
And those elements that you see that it's being tested for, like Mr. Craddock said, that does come from the health department for national drinking water standards.
Okay.
I have a question, Ms. Glave. Have we heard anything from any solar energy facility operators in regards to these changes that are being recommended by the Board of Commissioners so far?
I would say yes. We had a pre-application meeting with another one that wants to go in Charborough. It's a sun energy facility. And I mean, to be blunt, they're trying to get in ahead of this because the size limitation would hamper the project that they're working on. And the requirement for the properties to actually touch each other would affect them as well.
And what is the approximate acreage of this project that is in the works that's not yet
They
approved?
haven't submitted an actual application, and they're still working with property owners,
Okay.
but it's teetering on that 1,500
Okay.
acre cusp.
Can I, do we know the name of the one? Because, I may have to, disqualify myself on this one, because I do own a commercial warehouse, and a solar company has approached me about renting to them.
Well, this is a text amendment that applies countywide and not to an individual project and
Okay.
not to an individual company. So, my opinion, you would be okay with this text amendment since it's not a specific business.
Okay.
But it was good to disclose that.
Yeah, I agree with Ms. Glave. I don't believe that there's a conflict of interest or a perceived conflict of interest by being the owner of a building that may be used at some time for storage of
Okay.
solar energy panels.
Anybody else have any questions for staff? Is there anybody here from the public that wishes to speak on this?
Close the public hearing.
All right. close the public hearing, and I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to have some discussions,
Oh, okay.
please.
Well, let's discuss it.
At our last meeting in December, we had quite a few people come out to talk about the solar text amendment that was before us originally. And we had James Farabee from Shawboro, who said he was in favor of solar and asked that Currituck County please get rid of the ban. Joe Etheridge of Shawboro also spoke in favor of allowing solar farms. Paul O'Neill of CoinJock spoke in favor of solar and said he has seen it on both sides. And as a former Board of Commissioner, he has voted in the past against some of the solar fields, but now he has come to the conclusion there is no runoff pollution from solar panels, and the younger generation is looking at us to do renewable energy. And also we had Harry Johnson from Cypress Creek Renewables that made some suggestions as well. And one of the items that they talked about was not limiting the total amount of acreage for any project, regardless if it was the land was owned by one person or whether it was owned by multiple persons. And in my eyes, by the items that are listed in our packet tonight, on page 24 and 25. On packet page 24 in 1B, it says land use plan encourages new and expanding industries and businesses that diversify the local economy, train and utilize a more highly skilled labor force, and are compatible with environmental quality and natural amenity-based economy of Currituck. On page 25, it says it's required by changing conditions. North Carolina's renewable energy and energy efficient portfolio standards established by Senate Bill 3 in August 2007 requires all investor-owned utilities to supply 12.5% of the 2020 retail electricity sales from eligible renewable energy resources by 2021. Municipal utilities and electric cooperatives must meet a target of 10% renewables. If we limit the size of the acreage, we are not contributing to the benefit of our citizens and the electrical companies that are needing to meet this goal with renewable energy. Dominion Energy said that services in our area, solar energy, is key to its clean energy growth. Since 2013, Dominion Energy has helped bring 1,200 megawatts of large-scale solar into operation in the 9 states, including North Carolina. And on page 25 also, it talks about this is consistent with the purpose and intent of zoning districts in the ordinance. It says it's consistent and prevents incompatible solar array projects from being established that could adversely impact the quality of life for county residents. What I'm curious to know is what is exactly adversely impacting the quality of life when a solar energy facility exists. I think the only thing most citizens had complaints about thus far with the 2 existing solar energy facilities was noise, and that's only a temporary thing. That is not a permanent thing. The noise does not continue after the solar energy facility is complete. That's just a temporary thing. It'd be just like someone building a house next door to you. If someone builds a house next door to you, probably 6 months you're going to hear nail guns and beating and slamming and everything else. And then after that, you just have a neighbor, and there's no other noise. And something that I find curious also is would result in logical and orderly development pattern, and it prevents incompatible solar array projects. Ms. Glave, are you able to tell me what is or would be an incompatible solar array project?
It would be incompatible, would be defined as anything that is not consistent with the goals, objectives, and the standards set out in your text amendment.
Thank you, Ms. Glade. It just seems curious to me, Mr. Chairman, that all of these items on page 24 and 25 are asking for us to create business that is environmentally friendly. But on the other hand, in this proposed text amendment, the limitation on project size does not do what those other things on page 24 and 25 ask for. It's my perception and my opinion as a real estate professional and as an appraiser that creating a limitation on acreage is not beneficial for the citizens, and it's not beneficial for developers. It's not consistent with property rights for the owners of the land. It doesn't make sense to limit the size or the number of persons who can combine together to create a solar energy facility tract. And I agree with the other parts of this proposed document here about having a landscaping contractor or other certified persons, also changing the direction of the inverters to create less electromagnetic fields that could interrupt radar. And I agree that the solar energy facility companies should be responsible for maintaining their ditches. I believe all those things are pertinent, and as well as the 2 degrees of kinship section as well. By doing that, we're preventing unnecessary burden on the developer or the landowner by using the 2 degrees of kinship.
So you're okay with all the other changes other than the cap on acreage?
Yeah, everything except what's on page 26. All the other items on 27, 29, and 30, all of those are logical, but it is not logical to limit the size or acres of a project regardless of how many owners there are that own it. And it is not logical to limit a solar energy facility to parcels that are abutting. And that, according to Ms. Glade, that means that they actually have to be touching. You can't have a parcel here and a parcel here, even though there may be one lot between them and they don't physically touch. You can't use them in the same solar energy facility.
Or a road, I believe.
Or if a road divides a property that's owned by a property owner on both sides of the road, if it's the same tract or maybe even has the same PIN number, you can't develop on both sides of that road. It's not logical to limit the size.
I believe what this board passed originally was no cap. Am I correct?
That is correct.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay.
And evidently, that's what the commissioners at the meeting just following ours, they passed it because that's the way the motion was, and there was a second, and it was a unanimous vote.
That's also correct.
Is that correct?
Yes. You had one descending vote.
So 6-1, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for the correction. But in my opinion, it does not make sense to limit size for any project. If we're really concerned and we want to help our environment and we want to get away from fossil fuel consumption, pollution, then solar and or wind would be those alternatives, those alternatives that exist right now that can cause our dependency to be lowered on those fossil fuels.
But don't you think we should have a limit to how many acres?
That's what I said, should not have a limit.
So you're saying 20,000, fine?
If it's 20,000 acres, so be it. If they meet the UDO, I don't believe there are 20,000 acres
No, it's
in the
just-
county that could be compiled together. I think that number might be closer to 3,000 or 4,000 acres that would be located locationally where you could do that.
And the one in Moyoc is just over 2,000 acres. And right now, it was the biggest one in the state. It may be the second biggest one in the state, just for reference purposes.
That's just my opinion, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
I mean, I welcome other people to,
I think the
Say what they wanna say
opinion
about
of
it.
the board originally was that if a landowner or two landowners next door to each other have more than whatever their property it consists of, they want to do that with it, that if they meet the setbacks and all the other requirements, they could do so. And we weren't restricting them from using their property how they want to see fit. That's my take on it.
and you have people out there that are what you might call a purist about property rights, which means they should be absolutely no limitations whatsoever on property rights, but that doesn't create orderly growth and it doesn't manage growth. There has to be some governmental reach in to tell you what you can and cannot do. But when we start limiting things such as this, then we're infringing upon those rights that all property owners have here in the county. I don't think it's a wise decision, just like I didn't think it was a wise decision in December when we met and we made those changes that said there were no limitations on size.
Any other discussion? Are you, anyone ready to make a motion on that?
Mr. Chairman, I
Change
move,
that.
whoops. Did you need to say something?
I didn't know if you wanted to change this wording, so it's, before anybody makes a motion to not limit it to 1,500.
You could include that in your motion.
Shall I continue?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I had some additional discussion before you make your motion.
You got about 2 seconds.
What is your opinion, Carol, on property rights?
Well, I think within reason, a property owner has the right to do what he wants to with his property or her property, but yet they have to abide by the ordinances and the rules and laws of the county, the state, federal possibly. And I'm sure that if someone was trying to do something with their property and had these issues to deal with, then they would have to go through what a lot of people have had to go through in coming to the planning board or the commissioners, maybe even the that other committee that does variances and that kind of thing. Can you think of the name?
Board of Adjustment.
Board of
Thank
Adjustment,
you.
yeah.
But all in all, I think a person has a right to do with their property what they want to. But then again, there you have to wonder and be sure that they're not infringing on the right of someone else. So it can get a pretty complicated situation.
Thank you.
Were you in the process of saying something else?
Just a motion. May I continue?
Yes,
You got
ma'am.
anything else to say?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Go right ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I move that PB 1904 revised solar text amendment be approved as presented. The request the zoning text amendment is consistent with the 2006 land use plan because it protects active agricultural lands having a high productive potential and conserves these lands for continued agricultural use. It provides a new and expanding industry that trains and utilizes a more highly skilled labor force. The request is reasonable and the public interest because it prevents incompatible solar array projects from being established that could adversely impact the quality of life for county residents.
Are you asking with, as it's written, or
As it's
removing the
written.
cap?
Yes, I said as presented.
As presented. Any seconds?
I think we should change the maximum. I agree with everything you're saying, but I think, like you said, they should be able to do whatever they want with their property. If we could just change that in that.
Would you entertain an amendment to that motion?
You have to have a
There's a
second.
second.
You have to have a second if you do that. If there's no second, then the motion dies.
Second.
If I have I second lifting the size,
Okay.
the size limitation. Because that we voted for in December. I remember that. They were standing here, they were requesting that, or, the landowners.
Just as a point of order, it may be better, it sounds like we may be changing Ms. Bell's motion, so it may be better to let her motion die due to lack of second, and then someone else make the motion that I think I'm hearing.
Well, I'm just seconding her motion, and we're just gonna change the wording on the maximum.
But you
Well,
can't,
she
you
has
can't
to-
change
she
her
has to agree.
motion without
She
her
has to
agreeing
agree
to it.
to
Would you
the
agree to that
amendment.
change to your motion, ma'am?
Yeah, I'm pretty agreeable. Yeah.
All right.
So then we need a second, and then we can change the
So-
motion.
So, Anna has seconded, and you've amended it to no cap. Is
I've
that,
accepted that amendment.
you've accepted
Yes, sir.
that amendment? All right.
discussion.
So what we've got is a motion, a second, and an amendment with removing the cap on the acreage for
Correct.
a single owner and the two owners. No cap on anything,
Okay.
okay?
And removing the abutting property requirement, is that correct?
Tim,
Are we removing the abutting property as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank
You
you.
okay with that as well?
Just want to make sure that there is no limit to its acreage.
There's no limit to the acreage.
Okay, yes.
All right.
discussion.
Any more discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Thomas, for bringing that up, and thank you, Carol, for accepting his amendment to your motion.
You're welcome.
All right. I'll ask for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Motion passes. All right. On to PB 1901, Currituck County request a text amendment to the Unified Development Ordinance, Chapter 4, use standards to allow freestanding telecommunication towers in the single-family residential Outer Banks zoning district with a use permit. All right.
The last one, we've moved all the way down.
Musical chairs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to go over the text amendment summary first before we start talking about the general location. What this does is it will establish freestanding telecommunication towers in the SFR zoning district, which is the single-family residential Outer Banks remote zoning district with a use permit. Previously, this was not allowed, and it's currently not allowed in any other residential zoning district. But this would further allow for further clarification of the exemption standards that are in the ordinance for telecommunications towers. Right now, there are several exemptions, but there are two specific to the tower themselves, one of which is on properties that are owned by the county. The others are on properties that are owned by a fire department, and it allows for them to be exempt from the standards in the ordinance, but would not allow for the exemption of the use permit. And previously, that exemption would only apply to accessory uses. This will now apply to principal uses. And as I mentioned, it establishes a use permit requirement for these uses. It also establishes a maximum height. The current language limits the heights to 450 feet in all other zoning districts. This text amendment would apply a 190-foot maximum height limitation in the SFR district. It also would establish a minimum setback of 1,000 feet from the Atlantic Ocean mean high water mark. Since this happens to be a zoning district that is located on the Outer Banks, it would push the application for property west of Ocean Trail in most instances. And it would also establish a minimum 4-mile separation of any pre-existing telecommunication tower within the SFR zoning district. Now, looking at that area, the zoning district itself, this is defined in, see, it doesn't want to, here we go. This area here is the SFR zoning district. It is north of the paved road in the Outer Banks. It's defined as the off-road or the four-wheel drive area. It's remote. It currently only has one telecommunication tower, and it's located at the Corova Beach Fire Department in Corova Beach. And there are underserved areas in the southern area of the remote four-wheel drive area. The existing towers on the Outer Banks, there's one in Corolla and one further south on a water tank. And then on this map, you see the 4-mile radius for that existing tower, and you see the half-mile buffer for all the other towers in other zoning districts. This line is about the northern section of North Swan Beach. It would include all the properties North Swan Beach south, and would permit probably about one more tower in that area under this use permit standard. This is that Corova Beach area and Swan Beach, North Swan Beach, Ocean Beach, Penny's Hill is in this area to the south, which is that area where a tower could be permitted if this text amendment is approved. This line right here is the Ocean Trail or Ocean Pearl Road area, so it would push the tower in this area under those standards. However, if an applicant were to come forward and it would meet the exemption standards, they would require the use permit. They would have to come before the board for a use permit, but we would be exempt from all the other requirements of this ordinance. And that's currently in there. It just further establishes that as a principal use for that area. You have before you a worksheet that outlines the land use plan policies that are identified for this particular text amendment, and also the reasonableness and public interest. My memo is a little bit different than the other staff's. It puts all the information. I'm sorry for that. I apologize. I didn't realize that until right before the meeting, but it puts all the information on the worksheet. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Staff does support this request, provided it does maintain the rural character of the area. It continues to support those existing platted residential lots in that area through providing public safety services to both the residents and the visitors in that area. Again, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for staff?
I'll wait until after I hear the.
All right. Is there anybody here to speak on this item? All right. Nobody?
Ms. Valva, is that attorney here that was here to speak on this or no?
He's still here.
I
He
don't know
said
that he'll speak.
He doesn't
He
want
is
okay.
here.
We're primarily listening.
All right. I guess you close the public hearing if there's no one else.
Any questions for staff?
Ms. Valva, I have a couple of questions for you. In regards to the location of the current telecommunications tower, I believe you said that was located at the Corolla, or should I say Corova Volunteer Fire Department.
That is correct.
That right? And am I correct in saying that this proposed setback of 4 miles would not prevent any other telecommunications towers within that setback area, but they could be installed outside of that setback area? Other telecommunications towers?
Right. They would have to maintain the setback as shown, unless you qualify for the exemption.
And you had mentioned in our work session about the other piece of land located in North Swan Beach. Can you tell us more about that piece of land? Does it have any structures on it now, or is it vacant land, or that the fire department owns?
The fire department owns a parcel of land, a vacant parcel of land in the south of the existing tower that would be outside of that 4-mile radius.
So it is possible at some point that might be a location that could be used for another telecommunications tower.
Any area south of this buffer would be eligible for that, provided it maintained the setbacks.
So I have a kind of a weird question. If there are no areas once you get off the ramp for what, maybe a first mile or so, is that right? Where it is protected area?
There are protected lands in there. You kind of see that with this map. These areas in here and this area here are protected lands, federally owned lands.
What is the reason, Ms. Volova, that the limitation on height is 190 feet versus the other areas of the county has 450 feet? Was that just for the visual look of it?
Correct. Yeah, this is an area that visitors enjoy going to because of its aesthetics, and placing a tall tower in this area could have some impact on that.
Do you know if a 190-foot tower has to have lighting for FAA?
It has to have lighting, but it has to be a lit tower, but there are certain requirements in which I think they're at 200 feet is when additional lighting's required.
Okay. So this probably wouldn't be one of those flashing type things?
Probably not. That's usually the white light's usually an emergency light when the other one burns out.
Okay.
The white strobe light.
Okay.
Anybody else?
I have one other question for you, Ms. Volva. The 1,000-foot setback from the Atlantic Ocean mean high water mark, am I correct in saying that the location of where a telecommunications tower might go behind the volunteer fire department in Corova is far enough away to meet that 1,000-foot
It's
mark?
very close to the 1,000 mark. It's in the 900 to 1,000 foot area.
And I'm also correct in saying if the county were to construct or hire someone to construct a telecommunications tower, it is possible for other antennae to be attached to that, like cellular service or microwave service or other stuff like that?
Yes, so the exemption under the current ordinance states that it must be used wholly or in part for public safety and emergency communication purposes. So as long as it has some emergency communication equipment on the tower, it could qualify if it's owned by the county or by a volunteer fire department.
Okay.
Whether
The intent is to allow for public safety and not further restrict their ability to place a tower on the property.
And in our work session, you had mentioned about that other property in North Swan Beach that you could not put a telecommunications tower on that without a fire department existing there. Is that what I heard correctly? Or does there have to be a structure of some sort there because it would be a primary use then instead of a...
The issue was with the use itself. So the language in the current ordinance does not allow for a telecommunication tower in the SFR, or this remote area, the four-wheel drive area of the county, as a permitted use. It's just not allowed. So there was no exemption provision for a standalone tower on an individual lot. And what this does is it further clarifies your ability to put in a tower in this area, with a use permit, of course, if you qualify for the exemption. So that was part one, is it further clarifies the exemption. The second part is if you were to have someone else apply for a use permit on an individual lot that was not owned in part by the county or by the volunteer fire department, it would offer up an opportunity for that as well, meeting the criteria, the setbacks. And
So there doesn't have to be a fire department on that other vacant lot?
there does not.
Okay.
This would allow that.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I had, sir.
All right. Anybody else? All right, well, I guess we'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I moved to approve PB 1901 Currituck County because the text amendment request is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the 2006 Land Use Plan. The county shall monitor the placement of communication and other towers and shall take action as necessary to regulate their design and location. Policy CA7. It also conforms to policy OB1. And the request is reasonable and in the public interest because the Corova sub-area maintains hundreds of previously platted lots that are not yet developed, and these lots continue to develop with houses. The proposed text amendment will address a community need by allowing telecommunications towers in a limited, remote, and underserved area of the county.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
All right. Does anybody have any announcements tonight?
I have one, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
If I could have Ms. Bell come up front.
Go down there.
On behalf of all the planning board and planning staff, I'd like to present you this resolution of appreciation for your service on the planning board, and I'll read it to the public now. Whereas Ms. Carol Bell has faithfully served as a member of Currituck County's Planning Board from January 2013 through December 2018, and during this time served the Planning Board Vice Chairman for the year 2016 and as the Planning Board Chairman for the year 2017. Whereas Ms. Bell has devoted numerous hours and energies to serve in this capacity, and whereas Ms. Bell has served an integral part in shaping the future of Currituck County, and whereas Ms. Bell always acted in the best interests of the citizens of Currituck County as a member of the Planning Board, and showed steadfast leadership and responsible judgment during her tenure, and whereas the citizens of Currituck County will enjoy a higher quality of life as a result of Ms. Bell's dedication, now therefore be it resolved by the Currituck County Planning Board members that they would like to extend their sincere appreciation and thanks to Ms. Bell for her dedication and service to Currituck County while a member of the Planning Board and as a former Planning Board Vice Chairman and former Planning Board Chairman. Congratulations, Carol.
Thank you. This should go to my father. He's the one that put all this stuff in me.
Who did?
I have another announcement, Mr. Chairman. At our last meeting, I and others here were presented with their certificates of appreciation as well. And because we had such a heavy load last meeting in December, we didn't have much of an opportunity to talk about receiving that. And I wanted to tell the public and the folks here and the planning staff how much I have learned over all this time that I've been here 6 years. Carol's been here 7 years. And others have been here at least 4 years that received their plaques as well. And the public just does not understand how much work these folks with the planning staff actually do. They do their regular duties. They help citizens when they come in. They do all this work beforehand for us to make our life easier so when we get up here we look good. And it's not unnoticed by us here on the board, and we want to tell them all thank you and Ms. LaCicero for running the department well. So thank you all, planning staff members.
Thank you.
It kind of bothers me that I've been on this board 7 years, and I'm only supposed to be here 4. And I've talked to my commissioner, and evidently there's no interest in serving. And that kind of bothers me. I love Currituck County. I've lived here all my life, and I have thoroughly enjoyed serving on this board. I have learned so much. And if they want to leave me on here till I die, that's okay. Or, they can. But it just bothers me that, because I think they need to replace 3 of us. And none of the 3 of us have been replaced. So I guess these people just can't find anybody that's willing to do that. And it kind of makes me mad that these people don't want to know what's going on in their county and be a part of it.
Yes,
4.
4 as of today.
Oh, that's right. That ain't never going to happen.
We're very thankful of your dedication and your willingness to serve the community, every one of you. And it means a lot to not only us that we have such a dedicated board. We really appreciate all you do as well.
Thank you. Nobody can replace you, Carol.
I know.
I know that, but still,
She's a planning board mama.
I just asked, when I talked to Owen Etheridge about my replacement, I said, well, you can take me off the planning board whenever you can, but put me somewhere else.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we first came on,
They
they
could
were
be for
3-year
life.
terms. Yeah, they were 3-year terms when we first came on, and then later they requested it be changed to 2-year terms. So you don't stay on quite as long, and I'm sure it is hard to find dedicated individuals that do want to come and participate. You hear people all the time talk negatively about the things that happen in the county, but they're not always willing to do anything about it, which is that exactly what you're talking about, Carol. If people would participate, it would help the whole process out.
And the other thing about the years that you're supposed to serve on this board, is sometimes I'm not sure that it's not too short, because by the time you've gotten around to about the time that you should be replaced, that's when you've kind of taken in all the information and you can talk with some sense, and you can ask questions that aren't crazy, and you can make motions that are proper. And that takes a while. I mean, you don't learn that in 6 months. So that's another thing that they should consider when they're looking at term limits.
It's definitely a learning curve.
It definitely
takes you a
is.
while to get it all and comprehend everything, and it's a lot to read.
Well, I
many
had a bit
times.
of an advantage because I did serve on the Board of Adjustment before I came on this board, and I learned lots of stuff that can be used on the planning board through that board. So now they can just appoint me to the Board of Commissioners and we'll have a good time.
There you go. Make you run in 2020.
I don't think so.
Any more announcements? All right,
I'll make a motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
all right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. We're adjourned.